All right. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the 2021 American Horse Council virtual conference. We're really sad not to be together in person, but it's nice to see all you, although in that Brady Brunch format. And today is day 4. This is our Equine Welfare Day. So we're going to have a Equine Welfare Committee meeting this morning from 10 to noon Eastern time, and then this afternoon the United Horse Coalition is meeting beginning at 1 p.m. Eastern time. So we've got a great lineup for today. Just a quick reminder, we've all gotten a little accustomed to Zoom, but we are going to leverage Zoom technology, and we're going to use the chat feature at the bottom if you'd like to pose some questions. We'll see how our time plays out, and we'll try to get around to all those questions. And if we have ample time at the end, we will open the floor for actual questions too. So we'll just see how that comes about. So with that, let me turn this over to Cliff Williamson. He's our Director of Health and Regulatory Affairs. He's the staff liaison for this committee. And the committee chair is Dr. Tom Lenz. And we're delighted to have both of them to lead this discussion today. So I'll hand it to you guys.
Thanks, Julie. So we might as well just get started. Looks like we have quite a few folks on already. So from a old business perspective and updates, it's a fairly short meeting, but I'm sure we'll have more to discuss in new business. And then we're going to go into executive session at the end of the regular meeting. We've got a couple issues we need to talk about there. So Cliff, you want to go ahead and give us a legislative update?
Yes, sir. Um, well, I know that this worked a second ago. Okay. Yeah, we'll just start with the committee charter. Dr. Lenz, just to remind everybody what this committee is about. The committee charter is to monitor existing and emerging equine welfare issues that are of concern to the horse industry. Also to identify and prioritize concerns and opportunities, evaluate related information, and determine actions or activities that may be appropriate for the horse industry. Largely for the benefit of those of you who are not on the committee, we just want to let you know what we're doing here. And Dr. Lenz mentioned I'll provide a legislative update today. Again, my name is Cliff Williamson. I'm the Director of Health and Regulatory Affairs for the American Horse Council. It is also my pleasure to serve as the staff liaison to the Welfare Committee, Equine Welfare Committee. First update I wanted to provide everybody today is regarding transportation exemptions that were created during the COVID era, as we're referring to it. There are several transportation issues that I'll mention today. The reason that transportation is presented during this committee is because most transportation issues that we address here at the American Horse Council are presented to the relevant agency as welfare concerns. You know, it's not in our animals' best interest to have animals sitting on the side of the road, sitting at truck stops, or stuck in traffic unduly because of some unintended consequence to a well-intentioned regulatory action. The COVID era transportation exemptions were issued in March of 2020. The president declared an emergency, COVID, that warranted an exemption from several parts of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety regulations as part of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. These exemptions were primarily applied to our service regulations, allowing drivers more flexibility in their delivery windows and in their return trips. The emergency's response to the outbreak, or the response to the emergency caused by the outbreaks and their effects on people and their immediate risk, they present to public health, safety, and welfare in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. Largely, these exemptions were created to protect our supply chain. That said, in August of 2020, there was an extension issued to the emergency declaration, initially issued in March, and that extension incorporated the livestock industry, both in transporting live animals and in transporting livestock feed. That extension was the um, beginning of our industry's impact in this exemption. And it allowed animal haulers much more flexibility, especially as we started to see issues arise with the food supply chain and the trickle down effect of animals not being able to be slaughtered. That certainly wasn't impacting the horse industry with the closure of slaughter plants, but truck availability, shared holdover access, space access, and then the subsequent economic impacts of those stoppages certainly did have an impact to the larger agricultural community, including the horse industry. Unfortunately, I don't know how many people were able to take advantage of these exemptions. That said, the current exemptions, again, allowing for longer hours of service periods and less regulated return trip monitoring, have been extended until August, and it will continue to be a function of the state of the country and our recovery from the pandemic, as far as how long these exemptions will continue to get exempt or continue to get extended. That said, this issue will continue to be relevant, and I think that the examples that were set during this highlight the safety of our live animal transporters, and there are coalitions within the livestock community, and we are all trying to leverage these examples in a way so that we can make longer, more permanent exemptions for our industry in all transportation regulations and legislation moving forward. So it's something that we're monitoring, it's something that we're documenting, and it'll be interesting to see if we'll be able to use this moving forward. We'll move on to the next topic I have here. This is in relation to the Horse Protection Act and its funding. 2021 omnibus spending bill allocated $2.09 million to enforce the 1970 Horse Protection Act law that prohibits sword horses from participating in shows, sales, exhibitions, or auctions. That package doubled the 2020 fiscal year funding level. The reallocation of the money comes from 44 years after. That funding is a product of 44 years of USDA enforcement in the Tennessee walking horse industry. Show inspections have ebbed and flowed throughout that period. I'll note 2020, there were only 4 shows that were inspected. Largely, that is due to the COVID situation. In 2021, we've already met that mark, and we haven't even hit the busy September, early fall, late summer, early fall show season. So that money's already being spent. For those of you who may not know, soaring is a incredibly important issue for the American Horse Council. That occurs primarily in 3 breeds, and the inspection of shows for those 3 breeds of animals that may or may not have been injured in an effort to elicit a more exaggerated gait. It continues to be a hot button issue. Both houses of the Congress have been lobbied heavily in the past 15 months, in particular to address the soaring issue in a more concrete way. The American Horse Council supports the Prevent All Soaring Tactics Act in an effort to address this issue permanently. Last year, at the end of last year, we also saw a passage of the PAST Act in the House that led to some attempts at compromise language in the Senate in order to get that passed. That weakening of the language did not go through. Unfortunately, the Senate also did not pass the PAST Act in time before the Congress changed. So we are reinitiating those efforts. And if any of you have any questions or have continued interest in this subject, I would encourage you to look at the federal legislative update that was provided on Monday. That recording should be made available on our website later. The omnibus package included very clear language that the authority of USDA inspectors supersedes that of industry inspectors. And additionally, it also urged the USDA to reinstate the Horse Protection Act rule change that was finalized in January of 2017, but unfortunately shelved and did not make it through to through the OMB process. That effort is also being reinitiated under this new administration, and we will keep you informed of the progress of that effort as it begins to show some movement. Again, as I said, the House and Senate both saw increased outreach on this issue last year, and I anticipate the same amount of outreach being undertaken this year and moving through this Congress over the next year and a half.
Hey, Cliff, one question quick.
Yes, sir.
Do you think the consensus study report that Dr. Black and his group created for the National Academy of Science, you think that'll have any influence in increasing buy-on from legislators? I mean, it's a really good report, and it covers a lot of really good information.
Yes, I believe it does. More importantly than the impact it'll have in Congress, it had a tremendous impact within the advocate community. Mm-hmm. There were a number of people and organizations who were waiting on this kind of scientific language to take renewed or new action on this issue. And so it freed up a lot of organizations who hold themselves to a standard of scientific credibility to have this kind of evidence backing them up. So it certainly provided more ammunition for the argument, and hopefully that kind of renewed vigor will make an effort on Capitol Hill as well. Congress, there were several people's seats changed hands in the last election from top to bottom, so to speak. And so that will also have an impact because there will be renewed education expectations on behalf of the lobbying community advocating on this issue. And there are some new faces from some of the most problematic geographical sectors keeping this bill from moving forward. So
for those the folks that aren't aware of this, I know that it was covered by Dr. Black and the Horse Show Committee, but any of you that are not aware of that, I'd encourage you to go on the National Academy of Science website and look at a review of the methods for detecting soreness in horses. It's a really, really well done document. Really well done. I think it'll make some difference in soring of horses.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the practical applications of the document, I think, will have a different impact, but subsequently very important. Again, the science behind this issue and the application of the Horse Protection Act are rarely the most important parts of the conversations when we discuss this on Capitol Hill. This is an emotional issue. This is a fiscal issue. This is a cultural issue. And so I think for everybody around Capitol Hill, that document's going to serve more directly than maybe the folks on Capitol Hill. Okay, we'll move on to the next subject here, the Halls Act. So again, this is another transportation topic that I wanted to potentially introduce to you all. The Halls Act, or the Haulers of Agriculture and Livestock Safety Act, was introduced this month by Senators Deb Fischer and John Tester, Roger Wicker, and Tina Smith. The Halls Act would eliminate the requirement that livestock hours of service exemptions only apply during state designated planting and harvesting seasons. This is relevant because, unfortunately, planting and harvesting seasons are uniquely defined in every state. There's no standardization across the country. Clearly, there's a historical background for that. Not every state harvests at the same time. That said, why the livestock industry would be beholden to a harvest season is complicated. We move animals across our country every day for a variety of reasons. And so the fact that these requirements still apply to livestock haulers, it's not very intuitive. And we've also seen a movement in a lot of agricultural states to make the planting and harvesting season all year round, 12 straight months. And that helpful, but it really compounds the confusion on this issue for our drivers and for our industry as a whole. As I've mentioned to this committee, and to the membership of the Horse Council before, transportation issues, the horse industry has fallen in a gray zone in the transportation industry and regulatory requirements for a very, very long time. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago where the department recognized that we fall in a gray zone, but unfortunately, local law enforcement started taking advantage of that confusion to prosecute, and some say persecute, horse haulers. And so that these kinds of definitions and clarifications are incredibly significant to the future of our industry and our ability to move our animals. And horses move far more frequently over the span of their lifetime than any other livestock species. And so the implications of this, both, again, through welfare concerns, but also through economic ramifications, has a long-term impact on the health of our industry. Second issue that the Halls Act would address is to amend and clarify the definition of ag commodities. The definition is problematic in a weird way. The horse industry is able to benefit from being classified as livestock through definitions in completely separate legislation. We've been able to leverage that definition and take full advantage of USDA opportunities and the legislative benefits that are coming from being lumped into larger livestock efforts. Not all farm species have been able to benefit from that. And so the definition of livestock and then the broader definitions of agricultural commodities, particularly in light of some of the new cash crops that we see coming on board here in the United States, both in the fruit, vegetable space, tree nuts, but also when we see things like commercial hemp operations jumping up and things like that. We need to be able to more succinctly define agricultural commodities, and broadening that coalition, so to speak, is an important part of staying modern and keeping up. The third thing that the bill will do is authorize a 150-mile air exemption from hours of service requirements on the final destination side of a haul for ag and livestock haulers. We currently enjoy a 150-mile free zone exemption from the point of destination, from the start of our trip, but we don't necessarily have that at the end of our trip. And as many of you know, moving animals from your farm to the highway can be problematic, but also getting off the highway to your final point of destination, whether it be a fairground, a racetrack, a breeding facility, whatever, many of these facilities maybe close to urban areas, which will have increased traffic and present unique situations to your hauler. And that will add time. But if, God forbid, something happened like weather, other drivers inadvertently causing traffic accidents, uh, mechanical failures, any of the myriad of things that we all experience regularly while driving, period, much less hauling an animal, um, that will cut into your time frame, and that can put you in errors with the Department of Transportation, which could cost you your license. And so shoring up that pitfall is critical, again, to being in compliance. And we, within the horse industry, certainly have skirted the boundaries of compliance for a long, long time. But if we are anticipating enforcement from these agencies, we then need to hold their regulations accountable. And so again, this is the Halls Act. We are excited to see whether or not this version of similarly languaged bills can move forward and make more progress. But the American Horse Council is going to continue to follow these issues and take an active role in supporting these issues at the federal level. Okay. The next bill or next piece of legislation that I want to provide an update on is something that was presented to this committee last year during the annual conference. The Working Animal Protection Act would prohibit an outright ban on any legal animal enterprise utilizing working animals in ranching, service, entertainment, transportation, exhibition, and education. These bills are presented at the state level, and they are effectively attempting to be a stopgap bill. For example, preventing bills that would ban carriage horses, exotic animal exhibitions, circuses, from being enacted at the municipal level, at the local level, city level, and push these bills to the state level instead for larger conversations. They are not intended and do not, through their language, affect animal welfare laws that are already in place. They also do not protect any illegal animal enterprises. As I mentioned, this bill was presented to the committee last year, and since the presentation, we've seen it passed in Oklahoma and Arkansas, as well as being introduced in over a dozen different states. For those of you who may not have participated last year, I included the language to the Working Animal Protection Act. It is on the screen. Again, as I mentioned, it's in an effort to prevent municipalities from terminating, banning, or effectively banning livestock and animal use industries. We don't have we don't have an idea of where this is going to move forward. I have been told that while this effort has mostly taken place in Midwest and well, I shouldn't say it, but the flyover states, we are seeing a renewed interest in coastal states looking at this issue, both from the Farm Bureau perspectives and also from the initial group that presented it here at this meeting last year, the Cavalry Group. I have one other subject that I'll read this first. So the Horse Transportation Safety Act, was introduced by Steve Cohen, Dinah Titus, and Brian Fitzpatrick. This is a reintroduction of the same Horse Transportation Safety Act from the previous Congress. It specifically states no person may transport or cause to be transported a horse from a place in a state, the District of Columbia, or a territory of the United States to another place within the United States in a motor vehicle containing 2 or more levels stacked on top of each other. This is affectionately known as the double-decker trailer bill. A major driver in promoting the double-decker trailer bill reintroduction is the perceived impact on the slaughter horse industry and slaughter horse welfare. I will note for any of you who may be unaware that the U.S. Department of Agriculture has already banned the use of double-decker trailer bills for the purpose of hauling equines to slaughter. Specifically, this bill at this point is likely to only impact the rodeo industry and potentially a small sector of the working horse / ranching community. The Horse Transportation and Safety Act cleared the House in July of 2020, but was not introduced in the Senate. This iteration of the bill currently has 120 co-sponsors. I am going to segue this into another conversation, specifically the Investing in a New Vision for the Environment and Surface Transportation in America Act. The INVEST Act is a 5-year surface transportation bill. The last 5-year surface transportation bill was referred to as the FAST Act, did not pass. And so we are currently on the 6th year of the previous bill. But this bill directs federal investments in roads, bridges, transit, and rail, reimagines our national transportation policies, and helps meet the Biden administration's vision that includes 1, but potentially 2, equine transportation bills as amendments. The previously mentioned Horse Transportation Safety Act has been included in the INVEST Act as an amendment that cleared markup last week. Specifically, their language says no person may transport or cause to transport a horse from a place in the United States to another place in the United States in a motor vehicle containing 2 or more levels stacked on top of each other. So you can, it's the exact same language. The inclusion of this amendment in the INVEST Act, clearly highlights the supporters' investment in getting this through, while recognizing the unlikely nature of it ever actually passing in today's climate. There's a lot of higher priority bills that need to go through the House and the Senate. And so this is a way of packaging it up and moving it forward as quickly and as cleanly as possible. I know, again, the rodeo industry, particularly within the American Horse Council, is taking this issue very seriously and has consistently lobbied against any of this action that it would be taken without an explicit exemption for rodeo vehicles. Also note, most rodeo vehicles hauling horses into multi-level vehicles are specifically manufactured and utilized with alterations to traditional livestock vehicles to make sure that they're safe for horses. But we also have members here within the American Horse Council feel very strongly that those vehicles are not appropriate due to their height limitations. So I mentioned that there are 2 bills that are potentially included in the INVEST Act. There was an announcement early this week and continuing this morning even, suggesting that the second potential equine amendment would be a version of the SAFE Act, which I mentioned on Monday's regulatory call or regulatory update. And the SAFE Act, which now referred to as the Saving America's Forgotten Equines Act, introduced by Troy Carter, Brian Fitzpatrick. The amendment is introduced by Troy Carter, Brian Fitzpatrick, and John Katko. But the SAFE Act is introduced in May by Jen Schakowsky and Vern Buchanan. Legislation would permanently ban the slaughter of horses for human consumption in the United States, as well as prohibit the export of live horses to Mexican or Canadian slaughterhouses to be sold overseas. While the legislation boasts a new name, the text appears to be unchanged. As I mentioned, it is a holdover from last Congress's Safeguarding American Food Exports Act. The language introduced as the amendment has not been publicized yet and is not included on any of the official text attached to the INVEST Act, which implies to me that it did not go through markup, it did not clear, but they intend to introduce it as an amendment on the next floor vote. I will mention here that while the horse industry and the American Horse Council itself have failed to reach a consensus on the subject of horse processing, American Horse Council staff will continue to keep members informed on this matter as it moves through Congress. And with that, I should mention that the INVEST Act is slated to be on the House floor in the next few weeks for a floor vote. This is a large bill, very expensive bill, but there is a lot of bipartisan interest in infrastructure bills. And so unless there is a radical shift within the House of Representatives, I imagine the INVEST bill will pass. Dr. Lenz, that's what I have as far as legislative updates are concerned. I am happy to take any questions. I apologize if I have not been following the chat. But I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has them now.
So just remind everyone, you can either put a question in the chat or please raise your hand and we'll unmute you and recognize you. Thanks.
Or just speak up. Any questions for Cliff?
No, this is Scott Dornkamp with the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association. I watched the amendments that were introduced on Monday, I believe it was. No, I'm sorry, it's last Wednesday for the INVEST Act. And I guess I know everybody has their own opinion on the double deckers, but I have actually loaded horses on the double deckers in rodeo. And I think one of the misconceptions is that we just load whatever horse goes on there. We load shorter horses. We do not put our tall horses on there. We have straight decks. But one of the things that struck me in that meeting was that the Mr. Cohen, who introduced this, his solution was to tell the rodeo people to basically go buy another truck and trailer. And it is a little bit hypocritical, I would say, in my own personal opinion, saying that, if him being one of the ones that is concerned about greenhouse gas emissions. But we are, as an industry, we are absolutely dead set against this going past. We are trying to educate senators right now to get that part stopped. And I realize everybody doesn't have the same opinion as me, but from an actual experience standpoint, you're adding an extra vehicle and an extra chance to be injured on horses.
Right.
Thanks.
I think it's important for folks that aren't familiar with this type of trailer. It's important to understand why this legislation was introduced. It was initially introduced because there was a trailer wreck in Illinois with some draft horses, but I think that was proven to be driver error. But traditionally, horses that were going to processing plants were hauled in what they call pot-bellied or possum-bellied trailers, and those are trailers designed to carry cattle. And when a horse enters the rear of the trailer, or a cow, they have to go down a ramp into a lower level or up a ramp into a higher level. And horses that have never been in a trailer like that will balk. And when they're stimulated to move forward, they often jump like a horse would jump if it was uh, jumping over off of a creek bed or something. And a lot of those horses sustained head and eye injuries. And so this legislation was introduced. The trailers that the rodeo folks use are modified, especially built, where the horses are loaded straight in the bottom level or straight up into the top level. Uh, and so therefore they don't have to go through that type of entry. And they also have considerable headroom. I think the argument frequently is how much headroom should a horse have? And the trailers that I've looked at several of them, they have at least 2 feet of head space, which should be enough. It's not enough for a horse to rear straight up in the air, but it's certainly enough for a normal horse to be hauled. But that's just a little bit of background on why this is an issue. And I'm in full support of not holding horses pot bellies, but I don't see any problem with the modified trailers.
Right. And Dr. Lenz, as I don't think I have ever seen or experienced anybody in our industry putting horses in the belly of a
Right.
double decker.
Yeah, those are horses being hauled to processing plants.
Right. And I have seen horses being put into the nose of the trailers, but when they do that, those floors fold up.
Right.
If we haul a horse in the back or in the front, the floors that are the second level fold up, and we get them out of the way so those horses have headroom. But very rarely is that used. Those are used for calves and steers when we use them.
Right.
Thank you.
Cliff said it's illegal to haul a horse to a processing plant or to an assembly area prior to going to a processing plant on a double deck trailer. But Cliff, I'm curious if that's being enforced. Do we know?
Well, we don't have any processing plants in the United States, so it's usually
Well, but I
enforced.
mean going to Mexico or Canada. If it's being enforced. They're still hauling them.
The law enforcement has been educated along the relevant routes on the USDA guidelines for the transport of slaughter animals. Unfortunately, due to the defunding of USDA actions regarding slaughter of horses, USDA also lost a lot of their enforcement capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Subsequently, with the closure of the plants, the USDA also lost all of their permanent inspection points. And so their ability to enforce any of the guidelines and regulations on this issue has been hindered dramatically. That said, there are no double-decker trailers hauling horses to ports.
Right.
So that would be the equivalent, I guess, at this time.
Yeah, I think unfortunately when the class legislation doesn't allow the inspection of horses being processed for human consumption by USDA veterinary inspectors, which close the plants, so they're no longer allowed to inspect the horses unless a law enforcement officer brings it to their attention. They don't routinely check the horses at the border like they used to do. They used to check every horse, but they don't do that anymore unless a law enforcement officer brings their attention that maybe a horse is down in the trailer, there's a horse that has an injury.
But the USDA, I will acknowledge that the USDA has put together training procedures and they have offered training to law enforcement, but it's largely dependent on local law enforcement leadership prioritizing this issue, making their officers available for this kind of training, and USDA resources. And again, the agency has publicly acknowledged that they interpret the amendments introduced in the budget every year as taking a complete hands-off approach to this issue.
Yep.
I will also note PRCA does have a, or I think it's PRCA. Actually, I shouldn't say that. Somebody on YouTube has put up a video showing horses being loaded into a double-decker trailer. They show the horses getting in, they show the horses getting off. They put cameras in the vehicle, prior to loading and unloading, and it will certainly give you an idea of their ability to load and unload safely. But this is a contentious issue, as I mentioned earlier. Emotion and people's intuition about horses' ability comes into this conversation very quickly, and relying on the individuals involved in this and the experts who have documented this is usually secondary to furthering this debate.
Like most welfare issues. So, any other questions for Cliff while we've got him? So we don't have any other old business. Do we have any new business that we need to bring before the committee? Again, just speak up if you have something.
Or feel free to message me in the chat. If you'd rather do it anonymously or privately, feel free.
Anything else?
Not seeing anything new, Dr. Lenz.
Pretty quiet. Well, I think that we will, like I said at the beginning, this is a relatively short meeting because there's not a lot of material that we need to cover. We have one issue that we need to cover in the executive session, the closed session. So Julie, if there's nothing else, I think I'm going to close this session and give us a few minutes for folks to sign off, and then we will begin the executive session.
Okay, just a reminder to everyone, the next session for today will convene at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. That's our United Horse Coalition meeting. So we hope you'll come back and join us for that. And Dr. Lenz, just give me a second to sort of monitor who's dropping off and who's staying on, and we'll go from there. And
thanks.
And Cliff, I think you're gonna have to unshare your screen in order for me to do that.